Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Carol's Books and Storytime. I'm going to tell you the story today of the legend of the miraculous beam. Now, legends make up an important part of everyone's culture, and there is some truth in legends. But this one comes from my country, and there's a small town of Christchurch in Dorset, and this is where this took place. In the small town of Christchurch in Dorset, there is a beautiful Priory church. The story I'm going to tell you today is why the town changed its name from Fulham to Christchurch. The origins of this story are steeped in legend, and I'm going to tell you the story through the eyes of a carpenter called Simon. So you need to imagine that I am Simon, a young carpenter, and this is my story. We had a small Saxon church on the site on which the great Priory now stands. The townspeople wanted to build another greater church to the glory of God on the same site. But the lord of the manor, Ranulph Flambard, thought we should build the new church on St. Catherine's Hill, which is 2 miles to the north of the Saxon church. All the townspeople disagreed, and they said they wanted the church built right where there had been a church for nearly 100 years. Sir Ranulph would not be put off, and he started buying building materials and taking them up St. Catherine's Hill. But when we came to start work in the morning on the new church, there were no materials. They had all been moved in the night right down to the old Saxon church. And for a whole week this went on. Sir Ranulph, getting the building materials, moved up the hill during the day, and then in the morning there were no materials on St. Catherine's Hill, but there were plenty down at the church. Everyone said the angels must have moved the building materials every night. Well, Sir Ranulph gave in and said it must be divine intervention, and building work started on the site of the old Saxon church. Well, we were all very happy building this wonderful church, but only after a couple of days we carpenters were joined by a very young carpenter. He couldn't have been much older than myself. He never gossiped, never drank mead, only water. He was never there at meal times, and what was more puzzling, he never appeared in the wages line. So as far as we knew, he never ate and he never got paid. Well, one day a beam was required for the roof, and the place where it was needed was measured, and the timber was cut to the size required. But when the beam was hoisted on ropes to the position, it was found to be several inches too short. So we lowered it back down to the ground again. This was not good news, but we had to find another beam that length, and the work would be set back. Now, when we arrived for work in the morning, we found that the beam was not on the floor of the church where we had left it. Oh, no, sir, it was up where it should be, and had in fact grown to the proper length overnight, and had already been placed in the correct position. But it was a little bit longer. In fact, my friends, if you go into the church, you can see the end of the miraculous beam displayed in the ambulatory. But I digress. Did you know that the young carpenter never came back to work after this miraculous beam was put in place? Then people started to say it must have been Jesus Christ, the carpenter of Nazareth, who had been working alongside us, and it must have been him who had put the beam in place. He had helped to build his own church. So the townspeople decided to call the church Christchurch of Twynham. Later, the town became known as Twynham Christchurch, and later Christchurch. So that is my story. I worked alongside Jesus the carpenter, building this beautiful church. Thank you for listening. And as I said, there are several interesting legends. And I know for a fact that if you go into this church, you can see several depictions of the legend. And in the cloisterway, there's a round table which shows Christ the carpenter, round window which shows Christ the carpenter lifting the beam into position. And there's also a plaque depicting Christ working on the miraculous beam. But the miracles did not stop there. On Thursday, 25th of January, 1900, during a violent storm with hurricane-force winds, one of the pinnacles of the tower of the church was blown down. Weighing some 7 or 8 hundredweight, 380 kilograms, it fell on the nave of the roof, dislodging many tiles and making a large hole. But fortunately, instead of falling to the floor of the church, it lodged itself in the roof truss and did not fall through the vaulting to the floor below. We call it the nave. Many people were sheltering in the church after the morning service. Now that roof truss is now regarded as the second miraculous beam.